Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Stories of the Dark. I am Glen Clark on your Friday night. Hope everyone is having a great evening so far. Tonight we're going to be talking about demonic possession. I was going to have that included in my program from last night, but due to time limitations, I had to go ahead and continue that one on until tonight. So as I said, we're going to be talking about demonic possession. I'm going to have a couple of YouTube videos I'm going to share, plus some websites, and I'm even going to read some from a book that I have on poltergeist, possession, and exorcism. So right now we're going to take a quick little break so I can get everything all set up on the laptop here, and come back and I'll read you some stuff on demonic possession according to the websites I have. This is Glen Clark. This is Stories of the Dark. welcome back to Stories of the Dark. I am Glen Clark, and we are talking about demonic possession. Right now, I'd like to read from you from a book. It's called The Mystery Library, entitled Poltergeist by Stuart A. Cullen. So you can look up that book either online and check it out. And as always, comment on my videos, like and subscribe. You can also follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm also on SoundCloud, so many ways to hear the program now. So I'm going to read, as I said, from this book, Poltergeist, Possession, and Exorcism. It is a common notion among parapsychologists that poltergeist events can be traced to teenagers who may be utilizing psychokinesis or PK energy to move objects. There are those who believe, however, that human agents of poltergeists are possessed by supernatural agents, and their bodies and actions are controlled without their consent. Poltergeist possession is said to be a terrifying experience for both the victim and the friends and family of the possessed. Those said to be possessed by poltergeists are often troubled by severe headaches, insomnia, buzzing in the ears, hallucinations, and even insanity. They might utter strange, unintelligible sounds in voices not of their own. Other symptoms include levitation or floating into the air, and regurgitation of strange objects such as feathers, leaves, and dirt. Although the victims have no control over those bizarre actions, they are often all too aware that the events are happening. Sometimes the trauma is so great, however, that the possessed will block out any memories and will remember nothing. Shadows of the Demon. In the past, a person said to be possessed by a poltergeist was often said to be under a witch's or devil's curse. Raymond Bayless explains in The Enigma of a Poltergeist. The destructive aspect so often encountered with poltergeists fitted into demonic framework, and the actions of objects paranormally moved were plainly under the control of satanic forces. The very concept of supernatural forces and actions, such as PK energy, belonged to the future, and there only remained the explanation of witchcraft. The existence of subconscious activity was unknown. Either things were acted on by the known normal forces, or they were influenced by magical means. Magic was equated with the black art. The poltergeist and hauntings were shadows of the demon. In the 17th century, fear of demons reached epic proportions in Salem Village, Massachusetts. Over a period of several months between December 1691 and September 1692, over 100 innocent villagers were accused of witchcraft or worshipping demons. At least 19 were hung from the neck until dead on Gallows Hill. Some who have studied the evidence, however, believe that the strange events in the town might have actually been caused by poltergeists. The witch hysteria began when about a dozen young girls accused their neighbors of pinching, scratching, and biting them. Mather wrote about one such incident concerning accused witch George Burroughs. Biting was one of the ways which the witches used for vexing the sufferers. When they cried out of G.B. George Burroughs biting them, the print of the teeth would be seen on the flesh of the complainers. These poltergeist events were often accompanied by loud, unearthly noises also associated with poltergeist. One such incident was described by Deodat Lawson in narratives of the witchcraft cases 1648 to 1706, edited by George Lincoln Burr. The accused witch's motions did produce like effects as to pinching, bruising, tormenting them, and the afflicted girl had a grievous fit, so that there was such a hideous screech and noise as did amaze me. Further evidence of poltergeist possession is traced to the girls who were adolescents and teenagers. The typical ages of poltergeist agents. As in many other poltergeist cases, the children were extremely repressed by religious and social customs that did not allow them to express feelings of joy, rebelliousness, and anger. While the symptoms of the afflicted girls have been blamed on witchcraft, demons, and poltergeist possession, there is little proof that it was anything more than group hysteria. As Bayliss writes, however, well-known cases of demonic possession are difficult to distinguish from a certain class of poltergeist outbreak. But in the great part, both must originate from the same source. And that's just a little excerpt there from a book, Mystery Library, entitled Poltergeist. If you want to check that out, you go to your local library, you can probably find that still online. So I'm going to read from you now from the Catholic Herald .co.uk, and how the director of The Exorcist discovered the reality of demonic possession. William Friedkin filmed a real-life exorcism in 2016. Sometimes the best opportunities result from a mix of asking and having things fall into your lap. So it was for William Friedkin, who directed The Exorcist 45 years ago and thought he was through with the subgenre he helped create. Then came his documentary on exorcism, The Devil and Father Amorth. It was a complete accident, Friedkin told Catholic News in an April 16th interview in Washington to promote the film. I had no intention of doing this. I had no interest. The Exorcist was a work of fiction. I had never seen a real exorcism, and neither had William Peter Blatty, who had written the novel on which the movie was based. Friedkin said that he had been in Lucca, Italy, to receive the Puccini Prize for having directed the 4 Puccini operas. He soon heard Pisa was a 35-minute drive from Lucca, so he made the trip. Then he learned it was a 1-hour flight from Pisa to Rome. Given that he had 8 days in Italy, he wrote a priest theologian friend, and as a lark I asked, "Do you think I could get a meeting with the Pope or Father Gabriel Amorth?" The reply, "The Pope is not available, but Father Amorth would be very pleased to meet you." The desired meeting took place between Friedkin and the priest, whose skills in performing exorcism he characterized this way: "There's exorcist and there's exorcist, like there's basketball players and LeBron James." Friedkin returned to Los Angeles and was at the Vanity Fair magazine post-Oscars party when he told then editor Graydon Carter of his meeting with the priest. Carter urged him to write an article about Father Amorth. Before making a return trip to Rome, he wrote the priest, who answered only in longhand. "I pushed my luck," Friedkin said. "Would you ever let me witness an exorcism?" "Let me think about it," Father Amorth said. Eventually his order, the Pauline Fathers, gave permission for him to see an exorcism on a specific date, May 1st, 2016. I pushed my luck again, and I wrote back, "Do you think he would allow me to film it?" The word came back in 2 days that yes, he would allow me to film it, but alone with no crew and no lights, Friedkin said. Friedkin's filming of Christina, the first known filmed exorcism, is what makes up the core of The Devil and Father Amorth. I had been told by Father Amorth that this was her ninth exorcism, and she had experienced personality changes, vocal changes, and a kind of unnatural strength for a woman her size and age, he recalled. So I was aware from him this was going to happen. To what extent, I didn't know. He said he was surprised by how disturbing the demonic attacks were. I went from abject terror sitting 2 feet away from her to absolute empathy for the pain she was expressing. She's a wonderful woman. She's an architect. You wonder how these attacks came about and why. Father Amorth, who was 91, died several months after the filming. The priest was chief exorcist of the Diocese of Rome from 1986 until his death in 2016. Christina continues to seek help to cast out whatever demon is inside her with the help of other exorcists. The movie also shows Friedkin talking with neurosurgeons and psychiatrists who have seen his exorcism footage, who seem at a loss to either debunk or explain it. More attention to Father Amorth would have helped to offset the inevitable grimness of the right of the heart of the proceedings, said John Molderig, CNS Assistant Director for Media Reviews, in his review of The Devil and Father Amorth. At times, Friedkin appears slightly breathless with enthusiasm for his own material, and Christopher Rouse's churning score, who hints at sensationalism. But overall, the tone is respectful and sober-minded. The film is classified A-2, Adults and Adolescents, for mature themes, potentially disturbing images, and a rude gesture. Father Amorth said to me, "The devil is metaphor," Friedkin told CNS. The devil is not some figurative person, although he did say he has had conversations with Satan. But he said there is no figure as he's been depicted. He believes that the devil is metaphor. I 100% believe there is evil in the world, every day, all day, constantly, but there is also great goodness. Friedkin, who is raised Jewish, now embraces faith in a different way. Although he is not Catholic, I strongly believe in the teachings of Jesus. And I don't necessarily require the supernatural to believe in Jesus, he said, referring to the resurrection. Friedkin said he aims with the documentary are modest, just a sharing of information, which is what any filmmaker, especially if you make a documentary, experience. Here, this is what I saw, he said, and what I am saying to the audience. Make of this what you will, but here it is. We live in a very skeptical world, so I expect a lot of that. And you can have a look at that website again. It's catholicherald.co.uk. Personally, I've never seen this film, but I would like to check it out to see how good it is and what they actually did in that. I personally have never been a part of an exorcism. I've never, to my knowledge, I've never seen anybody possessed. I'm pretty certain, though, that it would scare me if I did. But being a part of an exorcism, I think, would be interesting for me to see. So, if any of you have any stories of demonic possession, or if you've seen it, or you've been a part of an exorcism by, watching or filming, whatever, please comment on my video on YouTube, and also go ahead and you can also email me too at storiesofthedark1@gmail.com. That's storiesofthedark1@gmail.com. Okay, we're going to take another little break, play some music, and I'll come back and read some more. I'm Glen Clark, and this is Stories of the Dark. And welcome back to Stories of the Dark. I am your host, Glen Clark, and we are talking about demonic possession. I'd like to also, I know we're still a little while out from Halloween, but also want to start working on a Halloween show that I'd like to do. So if you have any true, really good ghost stories, I'd like to see those. So you can also email those to me at storiesofthedark1@gmail.com, and hopefully I'll read those on the show, and maybe I'll be set up enough and I can actually do a live program and actually have maybe take some calls via Skype, and we'll just have a good time on that night. So anyway, back to our program here. The next reading comes from nzherald.co.nz. So it reads, psychiatrists believe demonic possession and exorcism are real. And we're trying to get my laptop going here. Said he's heard the voices speak in ancient Greek. He's heard them speak in Latin. Dr. Richard Gallagher says they converse in Chinese, Spanish, French, and they are widely smart and manipulative. The voices of the languages come out of people, he says, but they are not actually human. They're demons. They're real, and so is evil, he says. Demonic possession exists, and he has seen it firsthand. They're fallen angels, Dr. Gallagher tells DailyMail.com. This is what I truly believe. They're extremely bright. They're much brighter than humans. They have been around for millennia, so they speak all languages. I've heard them speak Chinese. I've heard them speak ancient Greek, which I studied, said the former Princeton Classics major. I've certainly heard them speak and understand Latin. The spirits do it, the psychiatrist says, probably to freak you out or to show off or to boast. The most striking thing about Dr. Gallagher before he starts to describe demons is his imposing 6'5" frame as the psychiatry professor stands in the doorway of his office in suburban New York. He is reservedly polite in the small space, where greeting cards sit on a table and family photos adorn a window ledge. As he beckons to a low couch adjacent to a desk laden with files and papers, the window is bookended by shelves of psychiatry and medical journals and books. In his 60s, Dr. Gallagher long limbs are clad in a blue blazer and khakis. He is extremely guarded about his own details, saying only he has a family and siblings. He estimates he's treated 25,000 patients over the years. Not one who walked through his door was actually possessed. Instead, the cases he's seen of possession and oppression, which is different and involves demons harassing an individual rather than taking control of them, he says, have all been referred to him, usually by exorcists. He's not even sure how it started a quarter century ago. And that was the reading by that. Oh, actually, there's more here. I'm sorry. So I didn't volunteer particularly to get involved with this stuff, evaluating people for possession, demonic attacks, says the New York native, who has written a forthcoming book about the subject and his experiences called Demonic Foes, Experiences of a Psychiatrist in the World of Exorcism. I was just asked to do it, and maybe people thought I was open-minded or whatever. Probably people knew I was a practicing Catholic, but I never volunteered for it, and slowly I just began to be thought of as sort of an expert. The first case he saw involved a victim of oppression, a Hispanic housewife and mother from the American West who was being assailed by demons. She was an incredibly devout and charitable Catholic, Dr. Gallagher tells DailyMail.com. But that exact holiness can sometimes open the door for an attack by evil. She and her husband both swore that she would be lying in bed and all of a sudden she would have the feeling of being assaulted by evil spirits, and bruises would appear on her body. So I needed to do a medical workup, Dr. Gallagher says. I needed to make sure she didn't have some clotting difficulty or something like that. I needed to assess her psychiatrically. She appeared to be a very wonderful, devout, charitable person, he said. He says, calling this woman and her husband salt of the earth people. I just came to believe their story, and I can't say I knew a lot at the time about cases which a lot of people, including myself, tend to call a case of oppression. He explains in possession, an evil spirit controls that person, takes them over, whereas with oppression, people use different terms for it. Some people use the term vexation. That indicates an attack by an evil spirit on an individual, but the evil spirit can't or doesn't take over their personality. And continuing on, it's not random at all. They're almost always a discernible cause. The most common cause is someone has turned to evil or the occult. and paradoxology. And it's often when they try to get away from the demonic world, feels that they have hold on that person. That person may have actually even promised themselves to Satan or some kind of evil, and then they, in a sense, are getting punished for trying to move out of that. That's the most common reason people get attacked. He adds, a lot of it depends on their internal intention. They are kind of really committed to the occult, as opposed to just kind of playing around with a Ouija board. There are a couple other categories of people that can get attacked. Very holy people. And there are many stories of saintly people throughout history that had demonic problems, he says. When it came to the middle-aged housewife from the West, he says he believes she was oppressed by evil precisely because she was so holy and was doing incredibly charitable work with people. I think she was attacked because the demon didn't like her level of sanctity. He says all her medical tests were negative. Her blood work was all normal. She didn't appear to have any other medical or psychiatric illness. She just did not appear to be a psychiatrically troubled person at all. She had children. She had a normal family. So I remember when the priest said to me, Dr. Gallagher, that's what I thought, but we wanted to make sure that we checked her out medically, I said. Well, Father, I'm pretty skeptical, and he said, that's the type of person we wanted. So then he continued to send me things, he and his colleague, who was an ex-Marine, who had also become a prominent exorcist. I actually became very good friends with them. Both are deceased now, and I miss them terribly. Before that first case and his relationship with exorcists in the demonic world, he says, he was unaware of the inconsistencies of possession and oppression. He grew up a devout Catholic, one of 5 children born to an Irish-American lawyer and his homemaker wife. Dr. Gallagher attended weekly Mass with his family and studied at renowned Catholic high school Regis in New York City before being accepted to Princeton. I didn't know what I wanted to believe, he says. I probably wanted to become a lawyer, a professor or something, but I did like helping people, so when I was at Princeton, I had a number of roommates who were pre-med, and I just got interested, intrigued by the idea of becoming a doctor, and I've also read a lot in my life, so I got interested in psychoanalytic ideas. And it was just kind of dawned on me that helping people as well as becoming a professor would be interesting if I did it as a professor of psychiatry. So that's what I decided to do. He laughs. I am the black sheep who became a psychiatrist in an Irish Catholic family. Following Princeton, he played semi-professional basketball in France and taught English at a French high school. Then he trained as a resident in psychiatry at the Yale University School of Medicine, and he is currently on the faculty at New York Medical College and Columbia University Psychoanalytic Institute for Training and Research. It was as his career progressed, however, that his acquaintance with the world of evil spirits intensified. He said he's seen about 4 cases a year, though he's heard of hundreds more, especially at meetings of the Europe-based International Association of Exorcists. He mentions this case of another U.S. housewife, though he does not specify her location. This woman, he gives her the pseudonym of Catherine, as a teenager had dabbled in satanic rituals, and she had kind of promised herself in some fairly foolish way to evil spirits, he says. She did a few grisly things which I'm not going to go into, but she also, with a couple of friends, did minor satanic rituals, and she became possessed. She was certainly violent when the evil spirit took over. She had a variety of signs of possession. It took multiple people to hold her down during exorcism. He adds she had a very odd symptom, which is similar to the case in the Gospels where she selectively couldn't hear certain things. If you said to her, Catherine, did you go to the store today? She'd say, yes. What'd you buy? Meat and potatoes. If you said, Catherine, did you go to church today? She would say, what? Catherine, did you go to church or did you pray today? Did I what? And continuing on, her sense of hearing was blocked, so we had the bright idea. I was with a fellow psychiatrist. We were assessing her, and we had the bright idea. Why don't we write it on a piece of paper? So we wrote it on a piece of paper. What did you do this morning? And she said, well, I drove the car to the gas station. I had to fill up the gas tank. Catherine, did you pray today? Did you go to church? And hold it up on a piece of paper. Do you know what she said to me? She said, Dr. Gallagher, why are you doing this? I said. What do you mean? Why are you showing me a blank piece of paper? Now, the obvious motive there was to prevent her from being able to talk about anything spiritual, to get the help she needed, get the solace and spiritual support she needed. The evil spirits take hold of people, he says, because they truly hate God and humans. We have the ability to love and turn to God. They don't. They made their choices and they hate the image of God in human beings, he says. They truly seem to hate human beings. I mean, not only do they want to destroy us spiritually, alienate us from God, but they seem to take almost a sadistic pleasure in destroying us as creatures who can still turn to God. To their enemy, creatures who can also still love, which don't seem capable of anymore. They've rejected the whole idea of godness and the love in the kind of perverted way. He says the demons exhibit extraordinary powers such as personal knowledge and near clairvoyance. On one occasion, a demon told him how his mother had died, ovarian cancer. The evil spirit also knew how 15 other people's parents died too. It wasn't just me. On another occasion, a demon told him exactly what a priest was wearing through the clergyman, though the clergyman was nowhere near Dr. Gallagher and the possessed person speaking. In a different case, Gallagher was also personally addressed. I had a demon say to me, how's that book going? It won't do any good. That's when I was first thinking of writing a book. So I've had demons come and they've said they hate me, but again, I think they hate all Christians. They certainly put more of their energy in saying how they hate the exorcist. That's their real target, not me. He tells another story of a woman in her 30s, a member of a Satanist cult who is thinking about leaving, which is when the evil spirits took over her body. This woman was in the back of a car once, and I was with the exorcist, and she went into a trance, he says. She was unequivocally possessed, and I heard her in the back seat of the car. She came out with some vile stuff. Leave her alone, you blanking priest, that sort of thing, and went on. This went on for about 5 minutes. Then she came out. She had no remembrance of it at all. He continues, I never went to her exorcisms because I was busy, but the priest would invite me to come to the exorcism. It wasn't around here, and I'm on the telephone line. This is a landline with the priest at the time. He says, you know, Rich, can you make this exorcism session? And then during that phone conversation, when this woman was hundreds of miles away, that same voice came in on the phone and said, leave her alone, you blanking priest. She's ours, she's not yours. And I did hear that. That was creepy. He said that despite his work and beliefs regarding demons and possession, he has never felt particularly harassed or discriminated against. because Americans tend to be kind of a tolerant, pluralistic people. In a larger society, it is not a fringe belief, he says. This is actually a mainstream belief. Opinion polls show that about 60% and upwards, probably about 70% of America believe in the devil, and the majority of Americans believe in evil spirits and demons and have some ability to directly attack human beings. People will sometimes say to me, "How do you feel about talking about fringe belief?" I say, "It's not a fringe belief. I'm more mainstream than skeptics." The other thing about skeptics is, the extreme skeptics, they never seen a case. They come up with all kinds of cockamamie theories. They say, well, this person heard Latin babbled as a kid, but it's kind of absurd. The demon is speaking fluent Latin and is understanding fluent Latin, as many of these people are not even Catholic and didn't even go to church as a kid. He adds, "I understand believing in evil spirits is not a very comforting belief, and it has implications that, we don't want to accept. Having said that, there's plenty of alternate theories, I don't think that those theories usually hold water. And when you've seen some of these cases, you realize it is clearly not something that could be explained by psychopathology or trickery or anything like that. And despite having witnessed evil and his interactions with demons, he says he's not particularly worried that they'll come after the psychiatrist himself. He's bolstered by his faith and the faith of others. I have a lot of people praying for me, he says. I'm not seeing the devil everywhere, he explains, adding, I always tell people it's an equal mistake to see the devil everywhere as to deny the devil exists. That again is from www.nzherald.co.nz, and you can I'll have that link posted on my YouTube video. Right now we're going to take a little break, play a little music, and I'll come back and we'll play a couple of YouTube videos and probably have one more article to read. So I'm Glen Clark, and this is Stories of the Dark. welcome back to Stories of the Dark. I am Glen Clark, and we are talking again about demonic possession. And right now I want to play a YouTube video for you. It comes from the official 700 Club. It's entitled, Demons Exist and This Man Can Prove It. So we'll have a listen to that. We'll come back and probably share another video and maybe one more website reading as well. So have a listen, and I'll be right back after this.
Are visitations by demons just the fanciful imaginings of fiction writers and Hollywood movie producers? Or do they really occur? Joe Heinzelman says they do.
There are demons that are set to keep us from God. There are demons that are set to do nothing but to frustrate the maturing process. There's no other grand scheme that they have but to do those two things.
Joe grew up in Missouri. He attended church as a boy but never had a relationship with Christ. Even when he was young, Joe could sense a spiritual battle brewing around him.
I used to love riding my bike, and there was a bike path that ran along the ditch, and I remember riding it from my friend's house, and I just really felt this presence of light on one side of me and a presence of darkness on the other side, and I just kind of shrugged my shoulders and was like, well, whichever one of you gets me first can have me.
Joe had few friends. He also never knew his birth father. The loneliness and fear he felt as a child would lead him down a dark path.
The biggest thing I was looking for back then would be relationships. It was the piece of my life I felt was missing.
When his mother and stepfather separated, Joe began to fill the void in his life with alcohol, and eventually the occult. He started experimenting with a Ouija board, which opened doors that would not be easily closed.
We had some very powerful experiences then, and I just felt this something extra in me, and I knew that something was different. And I remember walking down the street that night, and the cats were in the yard, and they would just start hissing. And
later, as an adult, Joe met 3 demons.
The demons had really started making themselves very known to me at that time. There was 3 of them. One was a manipulator, and it took on the female persona. The other was a tormentor, and he took on the male persona, and then the other one was the mastermind. Every night I would meet with them, and they would just fill me with this knowledge of the kingdom of darkness and how they operate. It was one of those moments that, look, if you'll just let us teach you, then we'll give you everything you want.
Joe says the demons began prodding him to harass Christians.
They began to put me into situations where, you'd have good-hearted Christian people, evangelists out, preaching in the streets. I would engage them in conversation, and 9 times out of 10, they would be outside with me 30 minutes later smoking a cigarette, questioning their faith. That was a big thing to me, to be able to unhinge a believer.
One evening, Joe says his demons told him to go and disrupt a church service.
They told me to mock God in his own house, and this was exciting for me. And so we go to this little tiny storefront church. As I was walking into the doors, those 3 handlers had to stand outside the door. It wasn't that they didn't want to go in, it was that they couldn't go in.
That night, the war for Joe's soul intensified.
The singer began to sing about taking the children back from the devil, and I got infuriated. I mean, it was just boiling inside of me, and I was wanting to explode and to tell her, man, leave the children alone, they're mine.
Eventually, the pastor gave an altar call.
This lady comes to me and asks me if I wanted to accept Jesus into my heart. And I told her, lady, you're a woman of God, and I don't want nothing from you because you got nothing I want. I don't have any clue how I got there, but I was at the altar. For almost 45 minutes, they were just casting these demons out of me all over the sanctuary. And so all I could think about was, man, the devil's going to kill me. They're waiting for me right outside. And this sweet old lady was patting me on the back, and she's like, oh, you're going to be okay, son. It'll be all right. Don't worry.
Joe says although he accepted Christ that night, he didn't surrender his heart.
He broke those strongholds off of me, but there was still that broken heart that he wanted to heal. I remember looking back as I was getting into the car at those 3 handlers, and just the hate they were filled with, and the darkness and it was all just directed to me, and I knew that it was on. I knew that they were coming for me.
Over the next 9 months, he went on a drug and alcohol binge, trying to run away from God.
I was so willing to run back into the darkness of trying to get high enough and trying to get drunk enough and trying to do enough crazy things to get this influence of light away from me.
He was arrested for robbing convenience stores and sent to jail. He became involved in a prison gang and was even planning to kill a man to prove himself. But then,
November 16th of 2002, I sat on a park bench overlooking the prison yard. Another gentleman that I had been in several violent altercations with had come, and he just asked me some questions.
At that point, Joe was faced with the many bad choices he had made in life.
God used him to speak his truth in my heart, to tell me that, man, I have a better path for you. And I decided, you know what? Whatever you have for me, if you can get me out of this moment, then if you have something better than my plan, then I'm willing to do it. And so I got off that park bench that day and started walking towards God and never looked back.
Joe says he now realizes how God used his time in jail to speak to him.
That I had to be in prison because I had to be in a place where I could not escape and I could not control. Because with the world, I could get lost and I could run and run. I know what it means for David when he said, I make my bed in hell and lo, you are with me. Because when I ran back out into the world, he was still there and he was still wanting to love me.
Before he was released, Joe entered a 12-step program and with God's help was freed from substance abuse and the demons that tormented him for so many years.
God was constantly showing me that he is so much more powerful than any of these things, and that Jesus came to set us free from those things, that those things do not have to have the reign in our lives that we give it.
Upon his release, Joe got a job working with troubled youth at a ranch in Arkansas. He also pastors a small church and ministers to those who struggle with demonic influences in their lives.
Jesus says that we can know God as God knows us. Man, I want to know how many hairs is on his head. I want intimacy with Christ and with the Father. There's a lost and dying world out there that needs to know that he loves us. And he's more powerful than any darkness that could ever overtake you. His grace and his mercy, his compassion for you is greater than any sin.
And we're back, and that very interesting video there. The next one I want to play for you is from subscribers. They're called, our group, they're called Top Fives. It's called 5 Extremely Creepy Cases of Demonic Possession. I'll play that for you. We'll come back and probably wrap up the program at that time. So I'll be right back. I'll be back right after this.
When it comes to disturbing subjects, demonic possession is up there. The thought that someone can be taken over and controlled by a demon is a scary thought. So here we have 5 absolutely terrifying cases of people seemingly being possessed by the devil. Michael Taylor. Michael Taylor is probably Great Britain's most famous case of demonic possession. Michael and his wife Christine lived in a small town in Yorkshire, England. Both him and his wife were very religious and had joined a Christian prayer group led by Mary Robinson. Long story short, Michael's wife accused him of having an affair with Mrs. Robinson. She confronted them both during a prayer meeting, but they both denied it. It's unsure what happened after, but Michael Taylor began acting extremely erratic and out of character in the meeting. Many witnesses at the church were certain he was possessed by the devil. It later seems that Michael and his wife came to a mutual agreement and the thought of him having an affair was dropped. However, his odd behavior continued for months until Taylor was certain he was possessed and visited a priest so that he could perform an exorcism. On an October day in 1974, the exorcism was carried out. Lasting over 24 hours, the priest was said to have removed 40 demons from Michael's body. But before returning home, Michael was told he still had a very evil demon lurking in his soul, far too evil to be removed by this priest. On returning home, Michael brutally killed his wife. At the time, it was one of Britain's most horrific murders. He tore out her eyes, tongue, and removed her face. He even killed their pet poodle. Michael Taylor was found by police, walking the streets completely naked and covered in blood, shouting, "It's the blood of Satan." He was sentenced to life in prison and has no recollection of the event. George Lukens. The case of George Lukens is unique in the fact he was claimed to be possessed by 7 demons that could only be removed by 7 priests. The exorcism became one of the most infamous demonic accounts of the 17th century. It all began when George started acting strange. Concerned he was possessed, Mrs. Barber, a friend of his, wrote a letter to a local priest, begging him to come look at her apparently possessed friend. The letter said that Lukens had slowly deteriorated both mentally and physically, often breaking down into seizures and growling at people around him. As time went on, the seizures got worse and he took on a supernatural tone. He began declaring in a roaring voice that he was the devil. On June the 13th, 1778, 7 priests were rounded up and began a lengthy exorcism at the Temple Church in Bristol, England. As the priests opened the exorcism by singing hymns, George Lukens fell into a violent fit, barking and hissing at the men before shouting that this torment of George Lukens would be 1,000 times worse for trying such a stupid thing as an exorcism. Following that outburst, Lukens was said to have cycled through 7 demonic personalities during the exorcism ritual. He then roared out that he was the devil himself. In the end, according to the witnesses, the demons were sent back to hell and George was said to be ridden of this evil force. Julia. In 2008, Dr. Richard Gallagher, a New York psychiatrist, was given a very unique opportunity. He was asked by a bishop to provide a psychiatric evaluation of a woman who claimed to be possessed by a demon. During his evaluation, the woman, to whom he gave the name Julia to protect her identity, would be completely normal, but at random intervals she would go into a brief trance followed by a rage, during which she would begin shouting at Gallagher and the attending priests, screaming at them to go away, you idiots, and leave her alone. Objects would fall from the shelves in the room and Julia would start to shake violently. Then, like a light switch, she'd be back to normal with no memory of any of it. After the evaluation, the decision was reached to perform an exorcism by Roman Catholics, which Gallagher also attended to report the event. The exorcism began on a hot June day. Gallagher said that despite the weather, the room where the ritual was being conducted grew incredibly cold. Later, however, as the entity in Julia began to make strange noises, members of the team felt themselves sweating due to a burst of heat from Julia. During the exorcism, she first went into a quiet, trance-like state. After the prayers of the Roman ritual had been going on for a while though, multiple voices and sounds came out of her, one of which was an animal-like growl which seemed to be impossible for any human to mimic. At one point, the voices spoke in foreign languages, including recognizable Latin and Spanish, even though Julia could only seem to speak English. Julia was also reported to have gained enormous strength, and despite the religious sisters and 3 others holding her down with all their might, they struggled to restrain her. It was also reported that she levitated about half a foot in the air. The purpose of Gallagher's papers, he says, is to document a contemporary and clear-cut case of demonic possession. He explains that even those who doubt demonic possession exists may find this case rather persuasive.
Maximum volume.
Doe. I did mention this case in my 5 terrifying Ouija board stories, but I just couldn't leave it out. It's the story of Roland Doe, who is famously known as the real story behind the novel and Hollywood movie The Exorcist. His case began in the 1940s, when after losing his aunt, 13-year-old Roland began using an Ouija board in an attempt to contact her. It was shortly after using the board that his family began to notice some strange things. The family heard the sound of marching feet, ordinary objects levitated and flew across rooms, and unexplained scratches seemed to appear on his body. Blessed objects such as vials of holy water and religious photos would also smash to the ground, with no obvious cause. It was after Roland was witnessed levitating in the air with his body contorted in pain that his family contacted a reverend. Reverend Luther Schultz put him in for medical examinations, but no physical explanation for these disturbing events was found. Roland then spent a night in Luther's home in order to be observed by him. The boy slept nearby in a twin bed, and the Reverend reported that in the dark he heard vibrating sounds from the bed and scratching sounds on the walls, alongside similar accounts that backed up his family's reports. Schultz concluded that there was evil at work, and a Lutheran rite of exorcism was to be immediately carried out. The first exorcism began, but Roland slipped one of his hands out of the restraints he'd been put in, broke a bed spring from inside the mattress, and used it to cut the priest's arms. The exorcism was immediately stopped, and Roland returned home with his family. The strange things continued, so the family moved to St. Louis, hoping that this would leave behind whatever was possessing their son. And while they were there, Roland's cousin contacted one of his professors at St. Louis University, Reverend Raymond J. Bishop, who in turn spoke to Reverend William Bowden. Together, both priests visited Roland and deemed him possessed by the devil. Permission from the Archbishop was given to perform yet another exorcism. This time though, regardless of Roland's struggle and violence, the priest continued, performing over 30 rituals, when finally they were successful. After the last prayers were said, the entire hospital heard Doe's cries of animal anguish, followed by a loud bang, and the reported smell of sulfuric odour could be smelt in the air. Thankfully, after the exorcism, Roland went on to become a happily married man and a father, never to speak of the case again. Annalisa Michael. Annalisa Michael is a controversial case, as well as the subject of many fictional accounts of her tragic story, most notably the exorcism of Emily Rose film in 2005. 16-year-old Annalisa Michael had a history of epilepsy and mental illness, for which she had often been treated at a psychiatric hospital. However, in 1973 she became suicidal, and her illness seemed to worsen. She started to drink her own urine, spurred all religious artifacts, and started to hear voices. Anna was also unable to walk past icons of Jesus Christ, and refused to drink the water of a holy spring. Despite trying, medicine did nothing to help her. Annalisa herself begged her family to bring in a priest because she believed that she was possessed by demons. Though her request was rejected by her parents, it seemed they did eventually allow it, and 2 local priests began treating her. In 1976, over the course of about 10 months, the priest attempted to banish the supposed demons from her body by performing a total of 67 exorcism sessions, which was about 1 or 2 each week, some lasting up to 4 hours. By this point, Annalisa was refusing medical care, refusing to eat, and saying that her death would be a form of sacrifice for other people's sins. On July 1st, 1976, at just age 23, Annalisa Michael died in her sleep. The autopsy report stated that her death was a result of malnutrition and dehydration from almost a year of semi-starvation, during which time the rites of exorcism were being performed. She weighed a frightening 68 pounds before her death, and the 2 priests and her parents were charged with negligent homicide. Now, here comes the even scarier part. Out of the 67 exorcisms that were performed, 42 of them were recorded on tape, and here is a short clip of the audio during one of them. I warn you though, this is very frightening.
Jetzt scheiß die Hunde. Vergab ihr. Scheiß die Hunde.
Ihr unreiner Geist, alles zu sagen.
Ich bin nicht unrein, no.
Im Namen Jesu, Maria, befehle ich der unreine Geist, alles zu sagen. Im Namen des Vaters, des Sohnes und des
Ja, das Scheißloch so nicht ist. Ja. Das andere daneben. Ja. Und das Scheißloch so.
That really is disturbing, and that's just a short clip of what was recorded. If you're really feeling brave, you can find longer versions of the audio tapes on YouTube. So that's 5 cases where people are said to have been possessed by the devil. I hope you've enjoyed, and thank you so much for everyone who is supporting and subscribing to my channel. It's awesome to see that people are enjoying my videos. Thanks again, and see you in the next one.
And we're back, and those were 2 very interesting videos. You can check out both of them. The first one was from the original 700 Club, and the one I just played was from Top 5s. Go ahead and check out their videos and subscribe if you like. Also, you can subscribe to my channel and like my videos and comment on them, anything you'd like to do. You can also follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm also on SoundCloud, Google+, among others, Tumblr. All my links will be posted on the video down below. We're going to go ahead and wrap up the program. As always, I thank you for joining me, and thanks to everybody who follows me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Special thanks to BlakCircleGirl for the work she does on my videos and developing all the photos you see of mine. That's all her work. So be sure to have a look at her other work on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and she'll also have her links posted on the bottom part of the video in the description. I'm Glen Clark. Until our next edition of Stories of the Dark, I want to wish everybody a good Friday evening. We'll see you on our next edition. Have a good night, everybody.